Greetings, friends. Today, we will explore a topic many have faced: how to act when a woman ignores you. But we won't approach this from a place of bitterness or ego. Instead, we'll tap into the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy to maintain our self-respect, confidence, and personal growth. The Stoics were not concerned with controlling external events, but with how we respond to them internally. The famous philosopher Epicurus said, "Men are disturbed not by things but by the principles and notions which they form." Concerning things, when someone ignores us, it can trigger feelings of rejection, hurt, and even anger. But the Stoic path teaches us that our troubles come not from the situation, but from our judgments. We always have a choice in how we view things over the next hour. We'll learn practice ICAL strategies from the ancient Stoics on emotional control, self-worth, confidence, and personal growth. We'll see how to avoid the traps of seeking validation from others and instead focus on becoming the best versions of ourselves. Even if you're brand new to Stoicism, have no fear. I'll guide you through these profound yet simple teachings, using modern examples we can all relate to, too. We'll apply this ancient wisdom to the contemporary challenge of being ignored by a romantic interest. As Marcus Aurelius reminded us, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Let's begin cultivating that way of thinking together. So settle in, keep an open mind, and explore how Stoicism's resilient philosophy can empower us when facing this all-too-common situation. The Stoic approach to Chapter 1. The Stoic approach to emotional control. Emotional control. Our journey begins by looking inward, for the path to composure lies in mastering our mind and emotions. The Stoics were pioneers in developing techniques for emotional discipline and rational thinking, as Marcus Aurelius declared. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Real is this, and you will find strength when a woman ignores you. It can trigger unpleasant feelings, hurt, anger, insecurity." But the Stoics would remind us that these emotions originate not from her actions, but from our judgments about those actions. We are disturbed not by the reality itself, but by our views of that reality. Consider this example: you feel confident and prepared for a job interview, but in the end you don't get the position. How do you respond? Do you spiral into self-doubt and negativity, or do you view it impartially? This is merely one outcome amongst infinite possibilities in your career journey. The Stoics were not immune to misfortune or adversity, but their secret power lay in separating external events from their internal experience of those events. They realized that while they couldn't control every situation, they could control their mindset and emotional reactions. Imagine you're out with friends and an attractive woman at the bar catches your eye. You decide to introduce yourself only to be met with complete indifference or even disdain. As she turns away without a word, a typical reaction may be rejection, embarrassment, or even anger toward her. But think for a moment what has actually happened here. This woman, a total stranger, has declined your advances. That's the objective reality. Your hurtful emotions come from the stories you tell yourself about why she ignored you. That you're inadequate, unattractive, a failure with the opposite sex. Those beliefs then generate feelings. The Stoic path encourages us to pause and view such situations rationally. Perhaps she's in a relationship or had a bad dating experience recently. Maybe she needed to arrive on time or felt intimidated by your approach. The reasons are endless, but they have little to do with your inherent worth. Her ignoring you reveals more about her current state than any truth about you, by separating the facts from your interpretations. You take back control, breathe deeply, and observe your thoughts and feelings impartially without judging them. This self-awareness and detachment is vital. Press pause when the movie of your mind gets caught up in negative narratives about yourself. Consult your rational faculty as Marcus Aurelius did, asking what is the nature of this thing in itself, and stripped of the outer casing under that shell of a bruised ego. Is there any genuine harm here, or is this just a fleeting social interaction with no more profound significance? The more you reinforce perspective taking over knee-jerk emotional reactions, the more unshakable your poise becomes, like working a muscle. It's a skill honed over time through determined practice, but the freedom of an unruffled mind in challenging situations is an invaluable strength. So the next time you face indifference from someone you're interested in, remember the Stoic is unmoved by the opinions of others. You cannot control their behaviors, but you can control how you respond. Will you unleash a tornado of negative emotions, or maintain your inner meteorological calm? The choice is yours. Focusing on self-worth. And Chapter 2, Focusing on Self-Worth and Avoiding Pedestals. Avoiding pedestals at the core of the Stoic philosophy is a steadfast belief in our inherent self-worth as human beings. As Marcus Aurelius boldly stated, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Too often we seek validation and self-esteem from external sources, relationships, careers, and societal status. But the Stoics knew that genuine self-respect can only be found within it, is a well that can never dry, if we have the wisdom to keep drawing from it in our modern world. We face constant pressures and illusions that can corrupt this inner sense of value. Social media, for instance, has become a staging ground for countless people to perform an idealized version of their lives, chasing after likes and shares as metrics for their worth. But as the philosopher saw clearly, these are mere outward casing. They do not reflect our essence. Imagine this scenario: you muster the confidence to approach an attractive woman at a party. You make conversation, feeling there's a spark of connection. But then her friends arrive, and suddenly you're treated with utter disregard, even mocking glances and whispers like a flipped switch. Her demeanor transforms from warm to ice cold, as she prioritizes regaining her friend's approval at that moment. It's easy to feel diminished, to take her behavior change as a judgment of your value. But the Stoics would urge you to pause and reflect. Have the objective facts about who you are changed? Or is this merely someone else's distorted perception, based on shallow social dynamics? You see, when we place our self-worth in the hands of others, we become perpetually vulnerable to hurt and suffering. We make them the arbiters of our self-esteem, which is an inherently imbalanced and hazardous position, as Epicus taught. We must be careful to make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest. As it happens, a woman's interest or admiration is not in your rational control, so it cannot be the basis for self-respect. Her ignoring you may sting at the moment, but it reveals nothing about your unvarnished worth. That worth was established long before this encounter by the virtues and qualities you've cultivated through conscious effort, your values, wisdom, talents, and strengths. The key is this: do not put anyone on a pedestal mentally, elevating them to a plane of judgment over your self-worth. Recognize that we are all flawed human beings, operating in from our fears, insecurities, and unconscious patterns. Her dismissive behavior likely has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with her internal lens. Just as you would not respect the opinion of a cruel person, do not be diminished by cruelty camouflaged as casual disregard. A famous saying is, "I will show favor to others not because they are human beings, but because I am." Your self-worth is a spring that flows from within. Tap into it by reflecting on your admirable qualities, skills, and virtuous actions, not just in dating, but all areas of life. List your positive traits, accomplishments, and moments when you felt genuine self-respect. Reinforce this solid bedrock of inner value. Then when someone attempts to undermine or ignore you, it will be like a gentle spring rain off a sturdy oak tree. Their behavior cannot penetrate or corrupt what you have rooted inside. You can wish them well, while firmly upholding your unshakable self-esteem. Suppose your sense of worth derives from the reality of who you have diligently become. In that case, no one can make you feel unworthy with disregard or disrespect. As long as you hold fast to this inner locus of identity and value, you will be free from the seductive traps of egotism, just as much as groveling insecurity. Remain calm and focused on the ethical part of yourself. Cherish this and keep it free from outrage and smear. By embodying wisdom, integrity, and nobility in your actions daily, you honor your highest self, the only judge whose opinion cannot be ignored. Chapter 3. Developing a mindset of self-superiority. Developing a mindset of self-superiority. The Stoics were not advocates of arrogance or conceit. However, they firmly believed that no one is inherently superior or inferior to you. As Epicus boldly stated, no man is free who is not master of himself. This doesn't mean looking down on others, but refusing to accept a sense of lower status or subservience. It is a mindset of unshakable self-respect and equality. With all people in today's world, we frequently encounter situations that can trigger feelings of inadequacy or intimidation, especially when it comes to interactions with the opposite sex. You may work in an environment where you're one of the few males in a female-dominated workplace, or you find yourself the sole single guy in a tight-knit group of married friends. These contexts can breed unconscious beliefs that the women around you are above you. Imagine you finally work up the nerve to chat with an attractive colleague you've admired from afar, but she immediately dismisses you with an arrogant, disinterested attitude. It stings. That little voice inside pipes up. What did you expect? She's way out of your league. There's nothing special about you. You're just a low-level guy here. But the Stoics would urge you to inspect that self-diminishing thought. Whose metric of leagues are you accepting indeed? It is not your own, for if you held yourself as fundamentally equal and worthy, such small-minded social distinctions would have no weight when we mentally upper hand to others, based on superficial traits like looks, status, income, or lifestyle. We surrender our inner freedom and poise. We make them the judges of our self-worth instead of the immutable and lofty judge within us. Remember, the wise man regards nothing but virtue as real good. Epicus used the vivid metaphor of an impregnable inner citadel to symbolize this sense of self-sovereignty. No matter the assault from external circumstances or personal slights, he knew his essential worth could never be penetrated from the outside, only from the inside by his faulty judgments and distorted views. So when that colleague carelessly ignores your greetings or polite banter, realize that her behavior is akin to an outermost gate. It may cause minor unrest. Still, it poses no threat to your unconquerable inner citadel. Her disregard, fundamentally, alters nothing about your inherent value as a person. The same applies to women you may approach in social settings who exhibit indifference or mocking attitudes. Surprise them with unflappable, noble self-composure, rather than defensively questioning your worth for you. Recognize that no one can attain superiority over your serene virtue simply through dismissive gestures or antics. Maintain your wise self-possession and self-control. This is true power. Question yourself: does what's happened either help or harm your sovereign faculty of self-governance? If not, carry on without a care. Of course, the Stoics were not immune to insecurities, anger, or hurt. They too had to continually reinforce this counterintuitive way of seeing themselves as vulnerable humans, but fundamentally noble equals to anyone who might cite them. A terrific daily exercise is to visualize dealing with petty disrespect or disregard from women you find attractive but who exhibit rude, cold behavior toward you. Picture yourself indifferent to their attitudes and unaffected by their changing opinions, like an emperor undisturbed by rebellious citizen. Their contempt cannot diminish your rightful throne of self-worth and generosity. You can take this ethical exercise even further by mentally sending them goodwill. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Or as it can be said, the best revenge is to be unlike the person who inflicted anger. Wish them clarity and wisdom to see beyond their materialistic delusions of worthiness. Recognize that their behavior stems from inner insecurities, fears, and pettiness. You have consciously shed this mindset of self. Superiority is not about ego, but owning your supreme self. Sovereignty as a human being. It's an unshakable self-esteem that no one can trespass because you choose to ennoble yourself according to virtue alone. The only true measure of merit? If someone attempts to diminish you through body language, averted eyes, or audible sneer of contempt, allow it to strike you like a gentle spring rain. For it holds no substantive insult. Your noble flowering remains vibrant and intact, nourished by the fertile soil of wisdom and right action. Pity them for their blindness, if you like. But do not be induced to assume an inferior position that your philosophical kingship never abdicates in the Stoics' view. Rejecting self. Sovereignty is akin to a king abandoning his throne and crown to grovel amongst peasants at the first sign of discord. Maintain your inviolable self-respect when you interact with women from that formidable inner citadel of sovereignty. Her interest or lack thereof transforms into utterly non-threatening data, neither damaging nor elevating for you. Esteem yourself according to your immutable virtues and self-governance, not the fluctuating opinions of others with practice. No one's regard or disregard can disturb your supreme self-possession, demonstrating mutual respect and confidence closely tied to cultivating a Chapter 4. Demonstrating mutual respect and confidence mindset of self-superiority is showing respect and confidence even in the face of disregard from others. As Marcus Aurelius wisely stated, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury when a woman ignores you or exhibits rude off-putting behavior. The tempting instinct is to retaliate with disrespect of your own, to punish her rudeness by acting impolitely in return. But this revenge-oriented mindset only serves to diminish yourself. The Stoics understood that how we respond to perceived insults or wrongs is a statement about our character, not a judgment of the offender. We maintain the high ground by staying calm, poised, and respectful, regardless of others' conduct. Let's take the example of being out with friends and multiple women giving you the cold shoulder throughout the evening. Their disinterest is practically palpable as you attempt light conversation. They prevent their gaze, fiddle with their phones, or even make subtle mocking gestures. When you're not looking in that situation, most people's egos would be stung the urge to lash out directly through insults or indirectly by turning away. In an offended huff could feel overwhelmingly appealing. You want them to sense your displeasure at their rudeness. But pause and consider what is truly being accomplished by escalating disrespect. You may provide momentary catharsis for your hurt feelings, but at what cost? The Stoics believed that reacting arrogantly or contemptuously in the face of slights actually shows a lack of confidence. Remember, the less someone is troubled by insult, the stronger their character is. Actual self-assurance does not need retaliation or pro oneself in response to perceived disses. It exhibits poise and dignity, period. The wiser move is to extend politeness, respect, and an air of unruffled nonchalance. The treatment you wish to receive kill their negativity with profound indifference, for you realize their conduct reveals their insecurities, not your shortcomings, as Marcus Aurelius reminded himself. Their souls once had the seeds of what is good, that is enough. Consider this wise advice from Epicus. If you want to make progress, put up with being seen as ignorant or relentless when you meet with opposition from others. Expect that there will be those who for their reasons meet your friendly overtures with cold disregard or even ridicule. The Stoic response: politely return respect and refuse to be thrown off balance internally. You see, confidence is an integral part of the Stoic philosophical framework. It does not stem from constantly seeking the approval of others, but from living with integrity. according to your highest virtues and rational principles, as the ancient sage Musonius Rufus taught. Confidence comes from leading a vigorous, truthful life. The best way to establish self-confidence is by focusing on your qualities worth believing in. It's not arrogant. Behavior self-esteem is based on your moral fiber and accomplishments. You may have worked diligently to become an expert in your career, making positive impacts. Maybe you routinely walk the talk of your highest values through community service or caring for loved ones, or you've consciously cultivated positive traits like patience, resilience, and friendliness in the ups and downs of daily life. Bring to mind vivid memories of when you felt proud of displaying these virtues, times you overcame adversity, rose to difficult occasions, or put others' needs ahead of your ego. This realization of your earned self-worth stemming from your actions rather than evaluations will provide an unshakable foundation of self-confidence. Then imagine carrying that well-learned confidence into scenarios where a romantic interest treats you dismissively. You contain your dignity rather than lashing out defensively or withdrawing in a huff. You don't sink to her level of discourtesy, but exhibit the poise, charisma, and graciousness her behavior currently lacks. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you shouldn't give circumstances the power to rouse anger, for they don't care at all. So why give it your energy? She may have her reasons now, but they do not necessitate you forfeiting your nobility or self-composure with practice. You can reach a point where no disregard or rudeness from a woman prompts any uptick in your calm self-assurance. Respond with the same spirit of patient friendliness and ease, as if she'd greeted you warmly. The Stoic moves through the world under external affirmation, a perfect rudder steering through any social circumstance. When you demonstrate this profound self-possession, often you'll find the other party cannot sustain their negativity, like adding a gentle rainstorm to dry kindling. Your relaxed equanimity extinguishes their small bonfires of impoliteness. The Stoics saw this as a profound form of teaching through living examples. If someone gets angry with you, respond with noble silence and tranquility. Kill them with unanswerable self-confidence and poise. Though their ignorance may initially meet your gestures of goodwill with discourteousness, your honorable conduct models the transcendence of pettiness often. This kindles a spark of respect or introspection where none existed before. Of course, there will always be those too hardened ever to drop their masks of arrogance or rudeness, no matter your diplomacy. But the Stoics saw even this as potential for elevating one's strength. In Stoic words, it is better to be impudent than to be servile. By maintaining your dignity, despite hostility, you exemplify the unconquered human spirit. In summary, destroy her ego is never by mirroring disregard, insults, or negativity. Instead, it's by embodying the supreme self-confidence, respect, and grace that her lousy behavior currently lacks, like the mighty oak. Weathering a storm with patience, you stand unwavering and magnanimous. This preserves your honor and provides a living parable on the virtuous and enlightened way to conduct oneself, avoiding the trap of seeking. Chapter 5. Avoiding the trap of seeking attention. Attention, a significant pitfall. The Stoics warned against is the endless pursuit of attention, admiration, and external validation. As Epicus bluntly stated, man is disturbed not by things, but by the views he takes of them. When we become attached to constantly seeking the approval of others, and incredibly romantic interests, we inevitably open ourselves to suffering and disturbance. However harsh or indifferent their shifting opinions of us, gain supremacy over our inner peace. Let's take the example of modern-day social media. We are flooded daily with images of idealized lives and carefully curated selfies, all aimed at grabbing attention and approval through likes, shares, and compliments. This environment can breed an unhealthy fixation on crafting the perfect persona to garner interest and admiration. But we become enslaved as soon as we're invested in this relentless feedback loop. If a charming new photo gets lukewarm responses, we internalize it as a judgment of our worth. Or if a romantic interest doesn't publicly fawn over our latest profile pic, the hurt and anger well up instantly. The Stoics would urge us to step back and reflect. Have the objective facts about your inherent value as a person changed based on these temporary data points? Or are you disturbed by your attachment to others, opinions, and validation? Perhaps an attractive woman you were chatting with online has suddenly gone cold, no longer reciprocating your messages with the same enthusiasm. You can't stop rereading the conversation, questioning whether a particular comment or photo turned her off your mind, races with editorializing about what she thinks of you now. But pause and consult your rational faculty as Marcus Aurelius did. What is the underlying reality here? In truth, all that occurred were some bits of digital text hitting or not hitting an inbox, her willingness to keep chatting with you one day versus the next. Fundamentally, alters nothing about your value as a person worthy of self-respect. The pain arises solely from your investment in her responses, functioning as judgments on your worth rather than simple neutral data streams to observe impartially. You cultivate an unshakable inner peace by being unattached to whether those messages ding. The Greek philosophers frequently use the vivid metaphor of an immovable rock weathering the oceans. Stormy waves, a woman's periodic ignoring or ghosting, may feel like a bee in force against your sense of self at the moment. But like that rock, you can remain unwavering and unaffected by consciously separating her behavior from your core solidness. As Seneca advised, begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. When you view her interest or disinterest through this wide-angle lens, it loses all power to disturb you. Her attention is one data point in the vast expanse of your life's journey. The Stoics also warned that by incessantly seeking the affirmation of a romantic interest, you inadvertently elevate them to a pedestal that makes genuine connection impossible. You have instantly created uneven footing, where they perceive themselves as superior and you as subservient or needy. Consider a scenario where you match with an objectively beautiful woman on a dating app. Almost immediately your focus narrows to deeply analyzing every tiny interaction. Why she didn't immediately respond to your opening line. What her one-word answers might indicate about her interest level. Obsessing over what photos and comments will maximize her admiration. But through this hyper-vigilant lens, you have already surrendered the solid ground of self-respect and confidence. By unconsciously putting the stakes of her attention on such a lofty pedestal, you drain interactions of their natural ease. She can sense this needy approval, seeking energy, which makes genuine letting down of barriers difficult. The wiser move is to maintain an unflustered spirit of nonchalant self-validation. In Stoic words, the highest good is a mind unmoved by injury. Remind yourself that her ultimate judgments have no bearing on your worthiness. View her interest or disinterest with neither joy nor sadness but serene impartiality. When you emanate this grounded, easygoing presence free of neediness, you create the welcoming conditions for an authentic connection to blossom, or not potentially. But your sense of self-worth is never held hostage by her opinions or involvement. The Stoics saw this detachment from external adulation as the ultimate affirmation of oneself and all humans, fundamental equality by seeking contentment strictly from leading a life of utmost integrity and virtue. No one wields power over your sense of completion. An old philosopher eloquently said, "Discard the cravings and fears that extend outwards, and assimilate yourself into the great consciousness." This great consciousness refers to the perfectly self-contained and unwavering mind that needs nothing beyond its cultivation of wisdom and right living after all. When you reflect honestly, how much substance or permanence do the affirmations or disaffirm of others? Honestly hold their attentiveness and praise are excellent when present. But inevitably faces are forgotten and infatuations fade. You chase an endless and unsatisfying cycle by anchoring your self-respect to this passing stream of image and ego. But root your sense of inner completion within your steadfast commitment to virtuous thoughts, words, and deeds each day. Now you drink from an eternal wellspring. No temporary attention or lack thereof can upset that reservoir. In Stoic words, the great thing is to guard your mind from that external distemper, when a romantic interest suddenly ghosts or ignores you. Your mind will naturally understand why and ruminate over what opinion they formed of you. But the disciplined Stoic allows those distempers to pass indifferently, like clouds moving through an unchanging blue sky. True, this path of detachment from external approval involves diligent practice and retraining of old emotional habits. But in doing so, you liberate yourself from the exhausting strings of perpetually seeking attention and validation from others. Your sense of self-respect and inner peace becomes inviolable, imperturbable, and often maintaining composure and self-possession in the face of disregard. Ironically, sparks more admiration and intrigue than seeking approval through antics. As Stoics said, their egos are like so much smoke dissipating into air. Let them dissolve back into themselves. Pay them no mind the next time someone you're interested in gives you mixed signals by being hot and cold. Try to remain calm and unfazed. Don't get too attached or push them away. Observe their behavior objectively as something temporary that doesn't affect your self-confidence. This is where absolute freedom lies. Shifting focus to personal growth at the heart of Stoic philosophy is that. Chapter 6. Shifting focus to personal growth. Our fundamental sense of worth and fulfillment must derive from within, not from external attentions or accomplishments. As Seneca eloquently stated, he is a slave, but shall that stand in his way? Show me a man who is not a slave. One is a slave to lust, another to greed, another to ambition. And all men are slaves to fear, and he who is not a slave to riches, pleasures or fears is a free man. When we become overly fixated on chasing romantic admiration or validation from others, we enter into a voluntary form of subservience and enslavement. Our emotional well-being gets tethered to the shifting tides of their approval, robbing us of our autonomy. Instead, the Stoics directed intense focus inward, on cultivating one's character through reasoned growth, virtue, and resilience. This formed an unshakable bedrock of self-respect, impervious to the opinions of others. Let's take a common modern scenario. You've recently gone through a breakup after a long-term relationship. In the aftermath, it's tempting to seek ego, soothing, and a quick salve for your bruised self-worth by avidly pursuing new romantic entanglements. You might download dating apps or put yourself into overdrive at social events, desperately overcompensating for the loss and rejection you feel. But this rush towards evidence of your revalidated mate value only reinforces your rootless attachment to external affirmations. Each match or flirtatious interaction becomes elevated to undue importance for your self-esteem, setting you up for future cycles of elation or devastation based on their shifting tides of interest. The Stoics would urge a different path, looking inward to strengthen your self-provided sources of worth and fulfillment. As Seneca wrote, there is no nobler or more difficult task than the pursuit of virtue. For it is not enough to learn virtue, you must also put that learning into practice. So rather than seeking worth from fickle romantic entanglements, invest that same energy into the growth of character and personal development. Take up a stimulating new hobby or artistic pursuit you've always wanted to explore. Read philosophical wisdom, and challenge yourself to live more deliberately according to your highest value use, or make a concerted effort to strengthen your physical and mental health through exercise, mindfulness, and nutrition. The aim is not perfection or even outward acclaim. It is simply about diligently nurturing activities, mindsets, and skills that elevate your sense of purpose and unbreakable contentment from within. Much like tending to a private garden, you take quiet pride in its beauty, blossoming due to your loving efforts. Of any outward observers, as you develop this grounded sense of self-actualization, you no longer hunger for outer sources of validation or self-worth, a casual flirtation or dating mismatch. Neither defines your identity, nor rattles your sturdy equanimity after all. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, take full account of what excellencies are, and don't let the persuasions of others distress you. If you fail to satisfy the ignorant who judge you by false standards, choose to satisfy your nobility first. Now, that's not to say you should entirely avoid situations where a romantic interest may arise. The Stoics believed in the virtuous pursuit of love and companionship, but they would advise against making it the fixated be-all end-all for your sense of inner peace. Imagine you attend a social gathering filled with unfamiliar faces, the perfect scenario for an inspirational meet-cute movie scene. But rather than walking in radiating a thirsty, needy energy of desperate desire for connection, focus instead on how to embody the Stoic virtues you've deliberately cultivated. Can you exemplify patience, openness, and composure while initiating witty, inquisitive conversations? Do you uphold your dignity and genuine friendliness if met with disinterest or indifference? And by centering your confidence in the person you've methodically molded yourself into, would you be unflustered by any individual interaction's outcome? You might unexpectedly connect with someone on a genuine level when you are confident and secure in yourself. But even if that doesn't happen, you'll go home content, knowing that you've lived true to your beliefs and don't need anyone else's approval to feel worthy. This path of deriving wholeness from within takes diligent practice and reprogramming of old habits. Too often our pleasure and pain centers have gotten habituated to seeking validation hits like lab rats, pushing a lever for brain stimulation, just as addictions to things like social media trigger releases of dopamine. Getting attention from a romantic interest provides temporary gratification that our psyches then crave, however. The Stoics advocated systematically loosening these behavioral shackles and shifting our fixations away from impermanent external rewards. As Epictetus said, you are merely a paltry soul carrying around a corpse strip. Away the bodily and social status signifiers and realize there is an aspirational core of purposeful essence longing to be prioritized. Marcus Aurelius similarly advised the regular practice of separation of mind from bodily form through present-minded reasoning. For example, if turned away by a romantic prospect, mindfully observe from a distance perspective any pangs of sadness or self-doubt that arise. Do they arise from your bodily cravings and sense impulses or your immortal intellect, which remains inviolably whole by developing this mindful separation as a muscle? You teach yourself to no longer identify wholeness with the transient attention of others. You return to the citadel of balanced reason and self-actualization that forms your most accurate core fulfillment. Ultimately, the Stoics saw this pursuit of virtue and knowledge as the highest pursuit of human beings, the source of lasting contentment that renders trivial the day-to-day whims of romantic attraction. In Stoic words, wrote, to be able to call your life your own is a blessing, but to owe that to your self-mastery is the greatest of blessings, and an entirely self-made happiness to be derived from no source outside yourself. So set your sights on the substantive joys and worthy growth you can bestow upon yourself. Become a master's student and practitioner of wisdom, integrity, and temperance view, flattering attentions from others as incidentals along the way, lovely when present, but fundamentally inconsequential for your self-actualizing journey. When you detach your self-worth from seeking external validation, you gain access to true and valuable happiness within your control. Being free from the need for approval allows you to attract genuine connections, or to continue growing independently with joy showing emotional. Chapter 7. showing emotional strength and resilience. Strength and resilience, one of the core practices prescribed by Stoic philosophy, is to remain firmly anchored in the present moment, unmoved by the turbulence of the past or anxieties about the future. As Marcus Aurelius sagely advised, confine yourself to the present when a woman ignores or rejects you. It's natural for the mind to instinctively churn over what happened and what it may portend. You may ruminate endlessly about why she lost interest, beating yourself up over what you did wrong. Or you may catastrophize about never finding a partner perpetually doomed to disregard. But the Stoics would remind you that these perceptions, amplified by runaway emotions, bear little relevance to the objective reality of this present moment. By staying calmly rooted in the immutable, now you neutralize much of the suffering created by subjecting yourself to mental time travel. Let's take the example of a difficult situation at work. You must the confidence to chat with an attractive female coworker, only to be met with cold dismissiveness and arguably rude indifference. Your friendly overtures are ignored or shut down with clipped responses as she checks her phone or looks away for most people. The emotional byproduct of this encounter would linger toxically. Feelings of inadequacy, anger toward her self-doubting playbacks of all your comments. This toxic mental stew could dominate your inner realm for hours or days afterwards. Every replay rekindles the sting, compounding the misery. But pause and ask what part of this exhausting emotional fallout has any bearing on the objective facts of this present moment. The awkward social interactions have already passed. She has retreated to her sphere, likely unburdened by any extra psychic baggage. So why lug it forward into your precious reality moment after moment? The Stoics considered this a profound form of self-inflicted suffering. As Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." By allowing your mind's discrimination faculty to become engulfed by churning impressions and stories about the past interaction, you actively create an experience of pain detached from any factual threat. Imagine that right after her curt dismissal you intentionally exhaled and released the whole mental event like a breath dissipating into the ether. Though the feelings may have momentarily stung you, centered yourself in this new reality where she resides on the periphery and you remain sovereign. This relaxed presence is what the Stoics termed apathy, a state of unruffled equanimity, where one's tranquility allows for clear judgment, unclouded by emotional disturbances from that locus of self-possession. You make a thoughtful assessment. Her behavior likely had roots in her insecurities, workplace, politics, or passing stressors that fundamentally had nothing to do with you. Then you promptly shift attention to the next square on the chessboard of your life, rather than dwelling in feelings that no longer exist. You bring your full faculties to engaging with whatever productive reality arises next. It's time to refocus on an important project, or maybe you'll reach out to a friend with whom you've meant to catch up. The Stoics were indeed not robots devoid of emotions. They understood that reactions like hurt, anger, and disappointment were inevitable human responses, as especially to perceived insults or rejections. The aim was never to eliminate natural emotional responses, but to refuse to supply them with repetitive storylines and mental airtime that could turn them into cyclical sufferings. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it by staying rooted in eternal." Now uncomplicated us less, imagining one could experience emotions while being utterly unencumbered by them. They come, they go, and the moment remains with committed practice. You can reach the point where hurtful encounters like that rude coworker elicit as much inner ruffle as a mild spring breeze. Brushing your face, you feel the sensations, let them pass, and sail forth like a steady ship into the next moment with no emotional barnacle weighing you down. This emotional resiliency and strength stems from a core Stoic precept. that while we may not control every external circumstance, we have dominion over how we respond internally. No one, however callous, has the power to disturb our peace of mind, without our cooperation forcibly. As Epicus declared, "It's not what happens to you but how you react to it that matters." When you grasp your power to accept and shed passing experiences radically, you become impervious to the emotional tractor beams of everything from rude romantic interest to contemptuous strangers you see. Our feelings often derive not from objective reality itself, but the subjective narratives we rapidly construct to explain and contextualize events. Did she ignore me because I'm unworthy? Does she pity or look down on me more than the neutral facts themselves? These interior fictions generate the most potent stresses. But the Stoic remains coolly untriggered, assessing each situation through the filter of their highest reasoning and owning their response. If you've genuinely displayed virtues like confidence, goodwill, and dignity, a person's disregard reflects more about their character deficits than any truth about yours. In this way, the emotionally strong individual provides an admirable counterpoint to the seething cauldron of pride and reactive dramas of those lacking self-mastery. They move through conflicts with uplifting grace and immunity from disruptive mental disease, so by all means feel the initial pangs of disappointment, frustration, or even anger in moments of disregard or rejection. Allow those transient sensations to course through your human vessel, accepting them with forgiveness and non-judgment, but refuse to perpetuate them through the compulsive looping of past narratives and future fears. Like a calm creek unfazed by passing breezes or the churning storms. Upstream, you remain an unwavering conduit for meeting each fresh new moment with maximum vitality and discernment. This inner oasis of presence provides a sanctuary from scorching emotions that would otherwise drain your energy reserves and peace you. Stand refreshed, renewed, the embodiment of that most attractive human trait. Soul-deep composure, ignoring her existence and creating. Chapter 8, Ignoring her existence and creating intrigue. Intrigue. The mind is a powerful force. As the Stoics knew, our thoughts and focus quite literally shape our experienced reality. Marcus Aurelius eloquently put it, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts when we allow our internal energies to become consumed and dyed by thoughts centered on one particular woman's attention or admiration. We undermine our sovereignty as individuated beings walking our path." Perhaps you've experienced this feeling. You notice an intriguing woman at a social gathering in your workplace or running mundane errands. Suddenly your focus narrows to her, like a laser scanning for potential interest or receptiveness. You play out imagined scenarios in your mind, evaluating whether and how to make an approach. You've given up your sense of control and self-assurance by becoming fixated on that one thing. Your satisfaction now depends solely on whether she responds to or rejects your feelings in the process. You've lost an essential part of your self-respect and authority over your path in life. The Stoics understood that there is profound transformative power in the opposite approach, radically accepting the object of your desires, irrelevance to your worth, and proceeding through life unhunted by the need for their acknowledgement or approval on a philosophical plane. This detachment from approval seeking represents the highest form of self-actualization. You alone determine your value. It cannot be undermined or reinforced by the mere impressions of others with your locus of validation. Turning inward, you become emotionally impervious to the shifting winds of attraction or disinterest. Practically, such poise and unreactive assuredness have an intriguing effect with the incredible strength to carry forth through life unburdened by whether one person flicks their lures back or ignores you entirely. There emerges an unmistakable essence. Confidence gravitates toward confidence. Let's consider a modern example from the world of celebrity culture. Why do personalities like Keanu Reeves or Larry David capture such fascination? Partly it's because of their apparent nonchalant self-confidence. You feel like they navigate life without being influenced or worried by other people's opinions or judgments about their status. Their indifference to public opinion creates an intriguing allure. Imagine spotting a woman at a party. She's gorgeous and exudes confidence. You feel a natural urge to connect with her and elevate yourself in her presence. However, instead of fixating on how to approach her, you consciously choose to adopt an attitude of radical indifference in reality. Her presence or absence has no impact on your life goals and sense of purpose. She is completely irrelevant to your current personal journey and emotional state. Whether she pays attention to you or not is as significant as trying to obtain a hotel pen during your travels. Entirely inconsequential from this locus of unreactive impartiality. You proceed through the social gathering with a refreshing poise and freedom. You laugh authentically with friends, immersing yourself in the experience rather than perpetually scoping the periphery for her interest. You emit the magnetic confidence of a person whole unto themselves, and often through the strange gravity of such self-assuredness you'll find the object of your passing fancy inexplicably orbiting into your sphere. As the Stoics knew, detachment from desiring admiration creates a powerful effect of intrigue and presence that naturally draws curiosity from others. You've created the space for a natural unfolding without attachment or investment by dismissing her relevance from your mental plane. Should your paths intersect, you can quickly greet her unburdened by suppressed expectations, and should she unilaterally exit, you've maintained the lucid course following your highest truthful self. The Stoics referred to this mode as living by nature, flowing with, rather than resisting the unfolding currents of a scenario. By refusing to grip tightly to prefabricated hopes or aversions, you become a spontaneous vessel for creative positive forces to manifest. Of course, this transcendent outlook takes diligent practice to embody, especially in our culture steeped in romantic mythologies and the idealization of impossible pursuits of reciprocation. Our psyches get easily hijacked by intrusive thought loops, valorizing or objectifying perceived prospects on a pedestal. But with the Stoics' philosophical toolkit of self-rainment, we can rewire those habitual fixations into flashes of observation without attachment. We fully acknowledge the physical attractions and approach invitations that may arise while remaining resolutely unbound from any mutual engagement or interest requirement. The self-possession is the essence. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, give yourself a gift, the present moment. Master Yoli handled, they discourage your desires for anything great or generous, but only deny yourself this satisfaction. You reserve your undiminishing dignity and present-mindedness by staying utterly unperturbed by whether your desires spark to fulfillment or rapidly extinguish. The allure has shifted. For intrigue herself becomes enamored of those who already go magnificently attended by their wholeness in the vast, open, non-reactionary field of the Stoics' calm presence. Potential connections with romantic prospects arise spontaneously when meant to. But like all ephemera, they can exist without grasping or requiring you move. Undiminished, radiating the compelling artistry of a life imbued with profoundly satisfying purpose. Ultimately, as Seneca proclaimed, there can be no greater blessing has been granted anyone than self-mastery, in radically ignoring others. Vary existences to determine your path. You've achieved the highest expression of confidence, not the explosive powder of ego, but an inextinguishable inner light, emanating dignity, wonder, and truly empowered selfhood. Increasing your value through Chapter 9. Increasing your value through self-improvement. Self-improvement at the core of Stoic philosophy lies the profound truth that our most precious resource is not worldly wealth or status, but the wealth we cultivate within through virtuous living and wisdom. As Marcus Aurelius beautifully expressed, the only wealth which you will keep forever is the wealth you have given away on the surface. This seems paradoxical. How can one increase their net worth by giving away or denying material riches? But the stone recognized that the treasures which elevate and liberate the human spirit are ones we must continually bestow outward through our actions and way of being, acts of kindness, resilience, integrity, courage, temperance. These are the incorruptible wealth that enshrines an individual's character and forge their worthiness from an inner wellspring of virtue. And the more we live by these supreme ideals, the more solid and self-assured we become in the face of life's inevitable setbacks and shallow judges. Let's consider the scenario of being overlooked or ignored by someone you are romantically interested in, for those who base their self-worth on the desire for that person's attention. The emotional pain can be intense, and negatively impact how they view themselves. But what if your sense of value transcended the narrow confines of romantic achievement or physicality? What if you had systematically invested in developing wealth reservoirs that one person's indifference or rudeness could never impact the wealth of emotional intelligence, mental fortitude, purposeful knowledge and service to others? Then likely, while you may feel a tinge of natural disappointment at the rejection, your core remains stubbornly unaffected. You've protected and elevated your selfhood by assiduously focusing on growth in areas that become self-perpetuating assets, rather than deficits based on temporary circumstances. The Stoics refer to this as the art of living concept, intentionally sketching out our life's journey as a masterwork of characterological development and ever-expanding wisdom. Refining our skills, knowledge, and virtues with zealous comment each day, we construct an unshakable interiority that towers above petty assaults on our temporary pride. Marcus Aurelius was a powerful emperor presiding over the Roman Empire. Yet he obsessively worked on perfecting himself as the ultimate legacy, famously journaling his philosophical meditations. From this vantage point, he could remain level-headed and unconsumed by perception. When snubbed or disrespected, for his sense of substance came from reserved deeper within. Imagine you've spent months or years diligently studying a field you're passionate about, whether history, computer science, entrepreneurship, or anything that stokes your innate curiosity. With steadfast discipline and commitment, you've absorbed a wealth of insights, theories, and skills related to this discipline that have expanded your expertise and intellectual agility. Then one day you find yourself in a social setting, with someone you're attracted to, only to have them seem to look right through you, or treat you with cursory disregard for those deriving their primary personal worth from romantic admiration. This experience might create an inner spiral of self-doubt and emotional suffering. But for you, while their indifference may strike a glancing, discourteous blow, you remain poised and calm at your core. Your most profound sense of identity, fulfillment, and purposeful perseverance arise from the intangible treasures you've methodically cultivated through your scholarly devotions, assets of knowledge and self-actualization that can never be tarnished by disrespect from transient others. This principle extends far beyond academic arenas. It could encompass developing emotional intelligence skills to become a world-class listener and nurturer of loved ones, achieving mountainous feats of willpower through fitness regimens and physical mastery, or devoting oneself to a craft or art form that demands continually refining creative capacities. Any domain that stretches our tolerance for struggle demands transcendental growth, and imperiously commands our integral essences to rise and be enlightened. This is where the truest wealth of personhood gets painstakingly minted. The Stoics knew this essence intimately. They knew the unconquerable value radiates from the interiority we've excavated and adorned as sovereign self-authors, not the externally assigned merits we ephemerally rent. This is not to say the Stoics rejected pursuing excellence in worldly attainments like career, social status, or even classical beauty regimens. But they understood these achievements as more akin to delightful accessories adorning the substantive soul sufficiency they'd intentionally forged as their life's masterwork. through discipline, restraint, and radical self-honesty. For example, let's take the arena of skill building and career excellence. Imagine you've worked diligently for years to become one of the preeminent experts in your field. You may be a respected surgeon, having logged thousands of hours honing your skill and procedural knowledge, or you're an educator, steadfastly developing innovative teaching methods that tangibly uplift your students. Then one day, at a social function, an individual you find attractive for superficial reasons openly dismisses or mocks your professional accomplishments with an arrogant air for those deriving their core identities from emblems of achievement and status. Such a bruising slight might prompt punishing ego plunges and eruptions of resentment, but for you, anchored in the serene self-respect born from grueling self-actualization and transcendental skill cultivation, the diss poses no existential threat. Their dismissiveness reveals only their insecurities and ignorance, while leaving utterly undisturbed the monumental virtuous wealth you've painstakingly accrued in becoming a profoundly capable human being of service to others. As Marcus Aurelius Calli reminded, the universe's change, our life, is how our mind interprets that change, so you patiently interpret their baseless arrogance as more tragic than dangerous, allowing the encounter to drift past like a meandering spring cloud. Your equanimity remains upright, your core trajectory gloriously unperturbed. The Stoics termed this eudaimonia, the joyous state of flourishing and wholehearted living arising from systematically watering the seeds of virtue and self-mastery, within insult, setbacks, and even life-shattering tragedies. May temporarily ruffle the sensitive surfaces, but they pose no threat to the greatness we've bestowed on the world, by rigorously expanding our faculties for insight, grit, honor, and love. Remember, true good does not have an outward aspect but is intrinsic and cannot be taken away from someone. The joys we experience internally are the only true source of delight. So on the path ahead, commit yourself to intentionally acing treasures, invisible to the world's judging eyes, an unwavering treasury of character, strengths, self-empowerment, and soul, illuminating knowledge that elevates your standing in accord with nature's virtuous grandeur. You become unignorable when you've heroically achieved that centeredness of an unconditioned, non-negotiable sense of worth unto yourself. A supreme self-possession emerges that dwarfs the flickering flames of others, egos and narrow myopias, and often ironically, this blazing incandescence of wholeness proves most magnetic to those receptive souls, in turn striving for individuation. They find it not as an external force, but as a self-generated radiance that is inescapably intriguing, admirable. And Chapter 10, Living. According to Stoic virtues, irresistible. Living according to Stoic virtues for the Stoic philosophers, the culmination of all their teachings centered on one mission: to live a life embodying the essential virtues of human excellence. As Marcus Aurelius put it, to live a good life. We have the potential for it, if we can learn to be indifferent to what makes no difference. This notion of what makes no difference points to the Stoics' keen ability to discern which aspects of daily existence held inviolable significance, and which were ephemeral distractions, devoid of substantive importance, by systematically training themselves to separate the inconsequential from the essential. Through reason, judgment, and self-discipline, the Stoics elevated themselves to walk as sages, living monuments to the highest ethical ideals at the very apex of human potential for them. Pursuits like wealth, pleasure, and social status paled compared to the supreme goal, the ceaseless cultivation of four cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Mastering these lofty virtues they knew was the only pursuit that led to sustaining eudaimonia, that flourishing state of wholehearted we-being, and transcendent bliss. Let's take the virtue of wisdom in the Stoics' view. This involved a dedicated and humble pursuit of truth and correct reasoning, an openness to continually updating their philosophical doctrines based on evidence and logic, rather than clinging to distorted perceptions or hasty conclusions. Imagine a scenario where a romantic interest at a social gathering entrances you from the hopelessly smitten depths of your psyche. It's easy to construct all sorts of embellishments about their character, your potential compatibility, and an imagined storybook future together. But pause and ask, upon what reasoned analysis is this gauzy infatuation truly based? Do you know this individual's authentic virtues, values, and characteristics? Beyond superficial impressions, have you genuinely reflected with detached rationality on your motives at play? The Stoic path would urge applying disciplined wisdom here to calmly assess the scenario, with a skeptical eye withholding conviction, until your ultimate judgments are based on substantive knowledge and facts, not idealized projections or ego-driven wishes for. As Epicus cautioned, what is the first business of one who practices philosophy to get rid of self-conceit? Then we have the virtue of justice, which in Stoic philosophy encompassed far more than legal or civic conceptions of fairness. It represented an unwavering commitment to moral equity, integrity, and honoring the fundamental truth of humans as rational beings, united in a collective ethical ecosystem. So when you find yourself on the receiving end of disregard, disrespect, or even cruelty from a romantic interest who has callously written you off, the just response is not vengeful antagonism, but a noble Stoic restraint, an understanding that to lash out or descend into pettiness would ironically represent the greater moral injustice against your highest self. As Stoic reminded, whenever any person hates you, or any envies you, then that is the sting of their own unjust character. Nothing more, that agitation is no part of your own character. The Stoic embodies perfect justice, upholding virtuous character and fair dealing, regardless of external provocations. This brings us to the virtue of courage, that tenacious fortitude to uphold one's reasoned convictions even in the face of personal risk or societal opposition. The Stoics saw this form of valorous resilience as the harmonious counterpart to wisdom. After all, insights mean little without the stalwart courage to live by them in romantic contexts. This courage may manifest in myriad ways: the willingness to honestly voice your interest to someone you find compelling, despite the risk of rejection; the fortitude to remain butchered in your unflat, affable self-esteem, even if met with cruelty or ghosting; the audacity to unapologetically walk away from manipulative, toxic entanglements that corrupt your integrity. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the universe is change, our life is what our thoughts make it. No tribulation, where dashed hopes of companionship or bruising personal dismissal bears any power to disturb you without your or cowardly resignation of noble character. Finally, we have the virtue of temperance or self-discipline. The Stoics saw this as an essential human capacity to regulate harmful impulses, desires, and emotional excesses in service of higher reasoning. After all, insight and courage quickly become possible with the will to constructively channel them. You may be inclined to obsessively lament over a potential romantic interest who blatantly ignored your conversational overtures. You might compulsively ruminate on what went wrong, or hatch plots to win their attention and regard. But the Stoic path of temperance demands asking what actual truth governs this situation, and what is the wisest, most prudent response that aligns with your highest integrity. Do you indulge the runaway excesses of the hurt ego, or calmly accept this person's passing indifference as irrelevant to your core values and sense of selfhood? Remember, it would be a blessing if we could become absolutely free from every passion of the mind, unmoved by pains and pleasures alike. True temperance has no attachment to situations unfolding per one's infatuated hopes. It simply presides with grace at their core. The Stoics espoused these supreme virtues not for grim austerity's sake, Still they perceived it as attainable for the highest form of human flourishing, by continually realigning themselves with wisdom, justice, courage, and our self-restraint not as abstract ideals but as lived experiences. Their daily conduct becomes a masterwork of what is possible when we prioritize actualizing our highest potential. As Sena beautifully summarized, a life spent doing praiseworthy actions is long enough, but through study you can make yourself immortal. To live by these Stoic virtues to embody rationality, integrity, resilience, and moderation, not just in the domains of romance or social justice, but in every choice and facet of one's being, is to author an enduring imprint on the world continually, an expressive living legacy, inspiring all those touched by one's noble character and incandescent soulful emanations. So embrace this path not from hollow dogma or showmanship, but to gradually alchemize your raw human experience into a life's work, befitting the masterful artistry intended for all beings. Let your every act, thought, and interaction be an indelible stroke of virtue etched into reality's cetal canvas, and from that lofty place of soul-awakened character in constant philosophical labor, what province in truth remains for someone else's passing disregard or romantic casted judgment to bear? Any indelible relevance you need not destroy nor demand validation, for you have immortalized your best self's most heroic efforts through a life's toil. Nobly perseverance. Throughout this video, we've explored profound Stoic wisdom for maintaining self-respect, confidence, and personal growth. When faced with being ignored or disregarded by a romantic interest, we learn to cultivate emotional control by separating external events from our inner responses, neither suppressing feelings nor giving them unconscious power over us. We saw the paramount importance of deriving our core self-worth, not from ephemeral attention, but an unshakable sense of virtuous character development. We examined strategies for radiating a grounded calm, poise, and dignity, even when met with indifference or rudeness, thereby destroying others, illusions of inciting us to compromise our nobility. We looked at avoiding the trap of making romantic validation and excessive need by detaching from approval, seeking and focusing energy on substantive personal growth. Instead, ultimately, we explored living in full accordance with the supreme Stoic virtues of wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, a path of continual self-actualization to elevate human existence. While the situations we encounter may sometimes trigger pangs of hurt, anger, or insecurity, the teachings of Stoicism provide an empowering philosophical framework for upholding our undiminished self-respect, confidence, and truth. By applying the rational and resilient perspectives shared here, you equip yourself with the strength to remain imperturbable in the face of disregard while centering purposeful attention on what matters most. Your heroic journey of personal growth and character development. No one can make you feel unworthy without your participation. The path is open to all who cultivate the highest, most virtuous versions of themselves from their inexhaustible wellsprings of dignity. I encourage you to integrate these Stoic practices into your daily life, mainly when dealing with challenging interpersonal situations or setbacks. As always, I welcome your comments and insights about applying this philosophic iCal wisdom in empowering ways for those seeking more guidance. Check out the recommended resources and readings I've linked below. The path of the Stoics is one of lifelong learning and growth. Thanks for joining me, and walk on, unshaken, my friends.